Welcome back to the good, the bad, and the orange. We've got our team in place. Beauty and brawn. Well,
who's the brawn?
I don't know what's the name.
That's me.
Last time we talked about the buyer process and all the interesting things we've run into. This time we think we're going to cover sellers because they're quite an interesting bunch right now, and our market is, as many of agents have called it, weird. And there's things happening that we haven't necessarily encountered directly in the past, and so I think that's part of where we're going to head. I think it's a great time to be on the market if it's time to sell for you. I mean, there's still plenty of buyers. I don't think there's ever been a day a house hasn't sold. I was telling people that the other day. There's always people buying houses. So us as professionals, it's our job to find that right person. So as we get into it, we've all got listings that have puzzled us a little bit. And we'll start, Heather, you're smiling. You're thinking, oh my gosh. Tell us a little bit about your listing. The one up in North Scottsdale that, hasn't had a lot of showings per se, but traffic. And then, of course, you have a new one in DC Ranch.
Yeah, both beautiful properties, exceptional, frankly. I just think it's we talked a little bit about buyers that are ready, willing, and able. And there's a lot of contingencies floating around now. We're seeing more and more of that, where sellers have to actually sell their property in order to buy, which, the past few years, it's been cash thrown around, and it's been pretty quick. Days on market weren't as long. So we're just seeing prolonged days on market. Buyers still have to sell sometimes in order to buy. So it's almost like trading properties, I feel like. It's like we need to get to this point to make this deal happen, right? You've got to sell. We need to be a little more strategic.
It's kind of like going to the car dealer, and then they got to go to the manager to, get his big marker out and say.
Third-party negotiating.
Yes, exactly. And it's true. One of the things that has changed is contingencies. And in the normal market back in the day, that was a pretty common element that we saw. But today, days on market as well. It sells in a week or a day or 2 weeks it never was normal. And now we're in that 30, 60, 90, 120 day range, and people panic, but that's really more of a normal market cycle. Mm-hmm. Bill, what are you seeing? You're going out to show some houses, so you're going to be looking at some.
I've been at Heather's listing and doing open houses with her. So I've seen the activity coming through at open houses and the level of interest. But, like you bring up, the ready, willing, and able part is a really important aspect when somebody's looking to make that commitment, because you might be ready and willing, but if you have a house to sell, you're just not able, Or, maybe one of those people that came through had quite a bit invested into the stock market, and that was shortly after April 2nd and all the tariffs. So, there was a huge adjustment to her portfolio, which also gave her a little bit of a concern about being able, to liquidate those stocks, at least at that particular point in time. So, it's different, I think, in the luxury market that you would find in a first-time home buyer market. But definitely in the luxury market, the move-up market, there is a little bit of a real estate catch-22 with the buy and sell. People are kind of getting stuck because they're not moving as quick, to your point.
What's interesting, though, even with all this going on, the luxury market maybe has flattened a little bit, but what's picked up is 500, 600 and under, where you'd think would be just as susceptible to those changes, and yet rates have softened a little bit, but the negotiating power, and that's the other thing that sellers need to realize is, there's a thing called seller paid buyer closing costs, and how repairs at Binzer that need to be done, and all those pieces that we used to be able to go, I'm not doing that. Well, today, the expectation is we're going to contribute and we're going to have our house in pretty good condition.
Yeah, I that's definitely been my experience too. I think there is a much greater comfortability from buyers to feel good about asking for their closing costs.
Emboldened.
And they don't.
That's the right word, yes.
I think buyer's agents are often flippant with it. Well, we have plenty of options to look at. They loved your home, but they liked a few others. So, they don't have to do this. So they're not only asking for those concessions, they're, like you said, emboldened to ask for the major repair, those big ticket items, whether they're necessary or not. Perhaps something is near its end life but still functional. Well, they're like, hey, let's just get it repaired. I don't want to mess around with it.
It is,
seller, you're going to take care of that for me.
it's frustrating. We think about roofs and air conditioners, right? They're the kind of the two main. And in our contract, it says repair or replace if non-functioning. And that seems to get ignored in these kinds of markets. Well, I know, but the roofer said maybe it's got 2, 3, 5 years left, so I want a new roof. Well, that's not part of the contract, but we still have to navigate that piece because, do you want to put the deal together? Does the seller want to sell?
Yeah, and being able to consult with them and help them come to terms with the fact that they may have to either credit or take care of a major item that they will never enjoy. And that's difficult. They've seen their values really grow, and they, in their minds, are still looking at yesterday's market where they could put it on the market and expect to get a full ask or higher. And
No inspection.
inspection.
No appraisal, no inspection.
Hard earnest money and out the gate, but now they're maybe lucky to get full ask, and then they're going to have to do a little this and that around the property in order to get the deal done.
I think one of the things I know I've noticed in relating to sellers with buyers is that, especially out-of-state buyers, they do not want to buy houses that need work right now. I think there's a fear of, how am I going to find a contractor? It's going to take forever. I'm not moving here to live through remodeling. And houses that are really turnkey actually still will command a strong price. Whereas the house that's, the glazing needs to be redone in the windows, it's not a big deal, but, you walk into the foggy windows
But
and
there's so many choices, too.
yeah, well, there is.
Yeah, but they're looking at the cost of inconvenience, and they're saying, I don't want to be inconvenienced. Like you said, if they're out of state, that's more than they want to navigate right now. But what do we do to counsel sellers? Say you have a home that is, a little older, a few decades, and those big ticket items are coming up. What do we do? Is the replacement cost of those items, is that adding value, or is it keeping that property in line with current values, not necessarily adding value, but not taking money off of the price, during the inspection period, or taking money off their bottom line if they were to repair an item?
One of the things I was taught early is every house falls into a range, no matter what. There's the, let's tear it down range, and there's the, I have solid gold faucets, the top end of the neighborhood, but it'll be the top range. You can't go above the range other than appreciation, and you'll never go below land value. And, when it's markets accelerating, we tend to go to the higher end of that range. When we're flat or a little bit of deceleration, that's where I think that's the counsel for people. They look at they go online and look at their Zillow estimate, and they look at the high number over here, and they go, okay, well, that's the high number, there's the middle number, but there's a low number down there. And I think you have to start thinking in those terms. Those ranges are market value range. It isn't wholesale and retail, it's range of retail. And so when we find houses that need some love or just updating or whatever that is, they got the golden oak. Golden oak was such a beautiful thing in the 80s. I've never really seen a golden oak tree, though. I didn't know they were golden.
No, it's at a certain stain you apply to it to make it golden.
I thought they were golden oak trees, and they have golden leaves.
They're just oak trees, and then they
They're
become
planted
golden.
next to money trees.
That's the way to go. And those seem to be scarce at the moment, right?
I'll let you know when I find one.
Yeah, well, please do. Then we can all get our little shoots and plant them. So that's part of that pricing deal.
You know what I think is important too? Like, so the market's become more balanced and it's shifted a little bit. It's not the end of the world. There's still a market home sale, and I think people need to know that. But, if you go back a few years, you had, one house for 10 buyers, which is why you have that acceleration in values, right? Today, we're either kind of equal to, or maybe there's a few more houses than there are buyers. So it's so important, I think, for any seller today to make sure that the home stands out. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do it with price, position in a way that people see the value that way, or you can prepare the home so that it comes to that value, so that when somebody walks in, they see the ease and the convenience and I can move right in, then they'll pay a premium for that. So it really is, up to the seller to determine what they want to do. They do have options. Because let's face it too, not many sellers will have the ability to put that money into it to bring it up to snuff, So they kind of have to go with the price option. It really just depends on your own situation. But there are ways to get a home sold, get it sold quickly, and get the best price terms and conditions.
I think one of the other misnomers is that if I should be able to add or subtract. I should be able to subtract just the value of that repair, not the pain and suffering portion of that. So someone says, well, it needs to be repainted. Okay, well let's say it's $10,000. I'm just going to take $10,000 off. But that doesn't move the needle
They
for
want 20.
Exactly. And so that's why when in counseling people, it's like, the price adjustments are not, don't take your bids and take it off. I mean, that's the last thing it can be. And on the other hand, I think right now, when you do those improvements, you get more than the dollar value because there are those people that just don't want to deal with it. So they're willing to pay for something that's done. Now, maybe it's not double that, but it's a higher percentage. And so it's our job, I guess, as listing agents to counsel them on where's a good place to invest money and where not. I mean, some people are just quick to say just do it all. Well, that's not always practical either.
Yeah, well, I mean, for buyers, buying a home is an emotional experience. So the better it looks, the more emotionally connected they can feel to that property, and the better position you'd be in as a seller. So if you have the opportunity to paint it, stage it, clean it, that's always the best route,
Right. Right.
Because you will get that person who's going to give you a premium.
And that, for example, like the guy that we were talking to, the seller, is
Correct.
like, and he wants to relist it with someone else. Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and having the same result. It's like, you've got to listen to the market. What are these buyers telling you by not putting in an offer? I mean,
Yeah.
they're telling you they don't see the value, they don't want to do the paint, and this individual says, oh, well, I don't know what paint color. That's where we step in. We have someone that is a designer that can actually pick out a great color for you that would be appealing to the masses.
It's
Correct.
called the quick sell color. Because it's funny, you paint that color and everyone goes, oh, that's a great color.
like
But they know what it is.
something.
Yeah.
Agreeable gray.
Yeah. Agreeable gray. Is there such a thing?
I think so.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe up in Washington, right? Isn't it gray a lot up there?
The
Rainy
sky.
gray? Yeah.
Agreeable gray or agreeable beige?
It might be agreeable beige,
Yeah.
yeah. There's
No, I
a
think
list
it's
of like
great.
10,
It might be.
Sherwin-Williams colors that are like the top 10 most
Yeah.
popular, like the ones that buyers want right now, or had wanted for the last few years. So,
And
yeah,
if anybody wants those color choices, we actually have those.
We do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They're proprietary.
What do you think's more important, the snake hiding in the grass, the hidden conditions that will come up on an inspection, or the cosmetic repairs that need to be addressed to list it to make it look pretty, to perhaps get a buyer in the door?
Right.
You know,
Get 'em
what's-
fall in love.
Yeah. Do you think that's more important? Is that, just getting them in, getting them in situated and thinking about the house and then discovering
I
the
think
latent
it's-
defects?
It's more important, but it is also important, depending on where you sit in this, transaction, if you will, to manage the expectations of that buyer. And a good buyer's agent will even ask those questions in advance. So, like, if you know that the air conditioning system's at the end of its useful life, the roof is at a certain age,
Yeah.
you can kind of prepare the buyer to not only make an offer, with those conditions in place, but then when the inspection comes through, now they still love the house because it was pretty and it looked good, but they're not surprised, and hopefully they're not looking to renegotiate.
Well, and the best practices is you write an offer based on the conditions you are aware of.
Correct.
So most of us know how to go and find the little plate on the air conditioner that says, oh, it was 1990, and so this is, 35 years old. So is that the right math? 35? Yeah, 35 years old.
It was
Wow.
35 years ago, Jay.
I don't like knowing that.
Well, and that takes that next negotiation out, right? You've set, and you can preface an offer. Look, hey, we love your house, but we see that X, Y, and Z. We factored those in.
Right.
So then, if a listing agent go to their seller and say, look, we're not going to hear about air conditioning and roof and a few other things because they've put us on notice that we have factored that into our price. So that's a good thing. We've gotten over that hurdle early, because really BINSR becomes sometimes the harder negotiation than writing the contract.
Right.
When we find all these, oh crap, oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, and that's why that disclosure piece becomes so important.
Correct.
And it's good to get it early. It's funny, the contract says it's not due till after contract is signed, and yet it's, how many people do we have as buyers say, I want the disclosures, and they go, oh, well, they haven't filled it out yet. Well, that's a problem, because, that's part of that that actually gets you a better offer
Right.
if you've given him all the information
Right.
versus not. It's like pre-inspection.
Well, that's why I always ask for that. I always ask for that before I write my offer. I ask for the seller's disclosure. And typically, agents will have it in the documents tab, but, not everybody is a good listing agent and has that available. And that's part of prepping your seller too. It's like, okay, we need all these disclosures filled out immediately.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I love that as a listing agent, getting that up front. I love fielding those calls, if you can believe it, from a buyer's agent before I even have a showing, because they know up front, like you were saying, it's padded into their offer if they know
Correct.
that the condition of if they know somewhat of the condition of the home, maybe the age of the AC roof, etc.
Right. It is.
Well, if you think of the alternative too, if they're not aware of those things and they make that offer, now the seller's got in their mind a certain number,
Yeah.
and that deal falls apart because of those conditions, the next time an offer comes through and maybe that other agent did properly manage the expectations of the buyer so that they come with an offer that makes more sense, the seller looks at it a little bit differently because they feel like, oh, well, I had an offer that was $10,000 higher.
Well, it's also
You know?
a good, as a listing agent, you need to know all those things in order to sell the home, right? It's like, on my DC Ranch listing, we have 2 new AC units. That's a huge value. What other house that I'm competing against, do they have 2 new AC units? That's a huge selling point. I mean, that's the first thing a buyer walks in and says.
Now, have you snuck over there at night to look at the little panels on there? No.
I'm going over today.
Why at night?
But those are the first things they ask. They ask for roof.
Yeah.
When was the roof done? Has it been done? Any leaks? And they ask for the AC and then sometimes the water heater. But those are the big ticket items that people are asking for. And one thing I wanted to say, sellers, please, when you go to remodel your home, please don't put 50 different kinds of flooring in. Because
Right.
that is the biggest turnoff.
The mismatch.
And it is so expensive. Well, people feel that it's going to be a huge ticket item, and it's messy, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to live through ripping out flooring. No one wants to do it, so just keep it consistent, okay?
Yeah, I think.
Agreed.
I think with modern floor plans, one flooring throughout is probably best, because each room sort of flows into the other. And you see with the rehabbed homes now that they've bumped out walls and opened up the kitchen, you don't want 19 different floorings. Maybe 2, maybe carpet in the bedroom and then a hard surface flooring throughout. So.
There you go. There's your decorating advice. Andy, who's our executive producer over here, quietly said, in terms of cosmetic, professional pictures of the house lead to more clicks, because he's our click guy. So let's talk about that. We talk about staging, whether it's hiring stager to bring in furniture, or even to stage what they have, or hey, I can get my Samsung does really great pictures, but
Okay.
Let's talk about that.
I have my process for listings. I always bring over my stager. I pay her. That is a part of what I offer my clients. It doesn't matter how expensive the home is. I treat every property as if it was $1 million plus. So I bring in Alicia. She walks the property. She'll work with what they have. tell them how to declutter, depersonalize, those types of things, maybe even reposition the furniture. Paint, she'll give you, you know, options if you want to go that route. But she gives you a list and you just do the little things and it makes a huge difference. And sometimes people just don't have an eye for it, right? And they're happy to, you know, usually most of the people will end up taking her advice and doing what she says, and it makes a huge difference. And then always, 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 photography is the most important thing because, as we know, like 80% plus of people start their search online. So the photos are the most important thing. Any agent that takes photos on their phone, they should lose their license, in my opinion. I just think
Commissioner Heather says.
What if
That's
it's
a crime.
land? What if it's land? Is that okay?
Okay, that's maybe, no, because you need a drone. And, I mean, if you can do it
You're
yourself.
right, yeah.
But it's like, you need a drone. But I always do, usually Twilight, you know, is so sexy, it looks so good, you know, so I like the Twilights, and obviously the drone shots, look, those are always
Yep.
awesome.
Well, it gives you a better
bird's eye
orientation of
view.
the, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I had a client who, the Mrs., who was a very nice lady, Alicia came in, this is several years ago, and she wanted to move their furniture around. And she said, I'm not going to do it. And, But Alicia, they did everything but move these few chairs, because I said, that's where we sit. And I said, okay. Well, as Alicia has a way of getting people who say absolutely not to do things, they moved them. And when they sold, she said to me, I have to admit that the way Alicia put it around, I wish I'd have known when we bought the house, because she said, I would have lived that way. It was so
Exactly.
awesome. And I only got to experience it for 30 days.
Yeah.
There you go.
And so, you know,
The value of a professional.
third-party professionals.
No, she's amazing. I love her. Smart lady.
It is. Well, and the photo thing, I don't people really understand how many showings are done online before people get to the houses. You know, over and over again, we were talking about how maybe there's less scheduled showings, but we're having so much open house traffic. And people are very aware of the properties. It isn't like they stumbled across the open house signs necessarily. They saw it online. A lot of them did their research.
Right.
I mean, they said, oh yeah, I saw this. I want to see what it looked like in real life. Oh, this looks just like it did. Great photography, or it doesn't. And that's, you know, that piece of it is really integral to the marketing success. And so that isn't a place to cut the corner.
Yeah, and when you think about it, when we're more moving towards a more balanced market, even into a buyer's market now, why would you as a seller, as a listing agent, not want to have photos that are eye-catching, beautiful, dynamic, interesting, draw you in? Because you've got you know, buyers have fatigue, online fatigue, you know, and they'll
The
click, you know, 2-3 photos in if you're
Right.
lucky, if the first photo
Next.
caught their eye and the price caught their eye. But if it doesn't look good, they're not going to pursue it any further.
And to that point, there's also a strategy, I think, in photo placement.
Yeah, the order.
The order of the photos. I mean, because what's the most important thing to a
What is the
seller?
value in that property?
Exactly. Is
Right.
it the views? Is it, you know, the backyard, you know, the kitchen? You know, it's all those things. It's like, what, you know, you don't put a random picture as picture number 2. You know, there's
Yeah.
like a whole strategy there.
Yeah, sure.
Well, are the people that will have 5 exterior pictures leading in, you've lost them at number 2 or 3. And
They
they're-
want to see the kitchen
and
by
they're-
picture
yeah,
too, or
and
the
they're- and-
sparkling pool.
And they're thinking, don't sparkling
Not
question.
not the laundry room. I mean, unless it's like.
Well, we jump to the conclusion that by the 3rd or 4th picture, if it's still outside, there's must be bad inside. You know, we haven't gotten
Yeah.
to the inside. You got to get them in.
Once
Yeah.
you hook them, then
Yeah.
you can give them those detailed shots. Yeah.
Well, a number of photos. Let's put 95 photos on it. It's like,
That's
You
a
don't
lot.
need-
I think you can tell the story in 20 to 25
I-
photos. Maybe if it's a luxury home or a large
Yeah,
home
a
or a
10,000
large
square foot
lot.
home's going to require a lot more
Yeah,
photography.
it's going to have
and
maybe
video.
up to 40, but really, you know, just enough to bring them in and get them an idea of what is there.
And
My-
maybe don't give them too many.
No.
Maybe you want to keep them guessing so that they actually get out to the property and look at it.
that's the whole
It's a
idea.
That does work.
So I know, though, that when you take a picture of a doorknob, and it's a really special doorknob, that will bring people in. I've always said, gosh, my photographer forgets to take a picture of the doorknob.
I don't have have enough special doorknobs at my listings. What are these special doorknobs?
I don't know. They're
They're the
it's-
gold-plated ones?
So, well, yeah.
They're the ones that talk like Alice in Wonderland.
Is there doorknobs talking Alice in
Yeah.
Wonderland? Oh, it's been a long time since I've watched that. Shows
Yeah.
that you're younger.
Yeah, I think too, like if you're a seller and looking to sell, it's important to know that the buyers are actually really educated these days, right? So, and I know you said this earlier, Jay, but Heather and I had somebody come into the open house, and what did he say? I'm a student of the market. He's looking at the price per square foot. So you also have to be able to
I
speak
schooled him.
intelligently about the market, and in a sense, protect and defend our list price, for our sellers.
Yes.
It's a little harder to do if the seller's kind of shooting for the stars, but when it is priced according to the market, then it's very easy to do, and you can point that out in an intelligent way that somebody who truly studies the market should understand.
Yeah.
Well, and the
You
other
learned something that day.
The other piece of that is that price per square foot is really the most misleading way to price a house, and yet that's what people always go to. So that digging deeper, but having your backup, at least in your mind, on how you arrived at that number, is important, and that's why, I've got clients will call and say, "Oh, but you said it's worth this, but the online markets say it's worth more." Well, again, the online valuations. They're
Sure.
taking a broader approach, and now it's that dive deep that is so important in pricing and getting more money out of it sometimes,
Right, and
or getting priced right.
hyper-local.
Hyper local.
But here's the thing, when you look at those online evaluations, there's also a range there that people tend to ignore.
Oh,
They
obviously.
only see the one singular number, but if you dive deeper into that, there's usually a range of that number, and that just happens to be in the middle of the range. So it could be above that, below that, always
Yeah,
depending on
that's
condition,
knowing-
location,
yeah, for
things that algorithms cannot take into
And
consideration.
they have no clue the value of a DC Ranch property versus a Greyhawk or a
Right.
McDowell Mountain Ranch or one of these other random communities, it's like they don't know.
Right.
They don't know the value, but we do.
Yep.
Are you saying that all other communities other than DC Ranch are random?
No, I'm just
Oh,
saying,
that's a joke.
no, I'm just
She's a bit
saying that maybe one that doesn't offer amenities.
Well, right.
Like
Huge
a DC
difference.
Ranch,
Yes.
and bus service, I don't know, to the school. I just, throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But, just little nuances, that certain communities offer.
It actually has a huge impact on price, as we can see. And people want to take this 3,000 square foot house versus this, and they're apples and oranges.
That's right.
That's why we talk about hyper local. So what else are you guys seeing in the sellers market? What's something that's made you laugh? Cry?
Cry?
No,
You know what's unique now? Like you said, a lot of people are going to open houses more so than making appointments. And we kind of talked about this earlier. We don't really have our finger on exactly why that is. We have some, ideas of why we think that might be. They don't want to bother their agent, or maybe they're not quite ready yet and they don't want to bother their agent for that reason. Or they think maybe that they know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They only want to bring their agent in for the negotiation
Right.
part of it, which is all great. But I would love to hear, if anybody's listening to this, why you would go without an agent to open houses, or what value you see in that. Is it just ease and convenience for you as a consumer?
Yeah,
Because I was sitting with somebody yesterday, and and I asked her, when do you want to go look at some homes? Because we just went through this buyer consult and we narrowed it down. So there were 4 homes that we wanted to see. And she says, "Oh, well, this one's an open house on Sunday." I'm like, "Well, we can see it with all the others tomorrow," And I just felt like that was a lot more convenient. Plus, you're not there with maybe other people in the house, so you get more of a private showing that way. Along with a professional who's a second set of eyes,
Correct.
that can point things out that
Correct.
you've described as important to you that maybe you wouldn't see yourself.
Correct.
Plus, they're able to compare it to the others freshly in their mind, as opposed to
Waiting 3 days.
3 or 4 days later,
Sure.
when everyone's can't remember the 3, 5 to 22 houses. I think you're showing 22 today. It's some huge number. No, but you forget what you saw. We
Yeah.
we have to go back and refresh our memory.
Yeah.
It's like the second showing. Sometimes people go, "Did I pick this house?" Or they'll go, "Oh, I love it even more." So it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nothing funny.
No, I don't have anything funny.
what has taken away your humor?
Absolutely absolutely nothing. No, I have a great sense of humor, and I do like to have fun with my sellers, even though at times you do have to deliver them less than exciting news. Maybe a buyer has chosen not to move forward, or they've decided to go with another home. So you have
Always a
to.
bridesmaid.
I know, and you do have to maintain a sense of humor and positivity with your clients, and make it fun, and just know that. There's a buyer for every house, number one, and you want the right buyer for your listing. Someone who's going to stick with it and take it to the finish line.
Well, I was online the other day, and one of my agent friends had an open house, and she had a picture of a dead bird, and she was scooping it sweeping it up with a pan or whatever. And I reached out to her. I was like, yeah. So this one time I was holding an open house, and a couple came in and they said, "Did you know there's a dead bunny out front?" And I was like, "Oh my God." I go out front and this poor rabbit is like dead. And I'm like, "Well, what do?"
Hassenpfeffer.
So I called my husband and I said, "You need to get over here right now." And he's like, "I'm not coming over there to get a rabbit. What am I?" I was like, so I didn't know what to do.
Surprised you didn't call
so
a
I went out.
Grocery bag, glove.
I went out front and I found like a palm frond kind of thing. Rest in peace, bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
But that was my good story for the day.
What other weird things have you seen? That's a great lead-in, actually. I mean, we have all gone in to had one of our listings where you went, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, there's plenty of rodents who will drown themselves in pools, and you pull the scupper open and you go, "Oh
God!"
But what else? What have we done as listing agents?
Well, I picked up dog poop.
Oh yeah.
In the house right before it's showing.
So when it's in the house, I don't touch it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't use my bare hands, but
Or like there's a dead cockroach in a bathtub, and I was like, "Oh my God." So then I have to go.
oh yeah,
And then sometimes
sweep that out the door.
Sometimes people don't have paper towels.
No.
And I'm like
Right.
frantically looking around the house, so and I'm like, toilet paper. Use toilet paper to pick it up. I was like, oh my God.
And what if they don't have toilet paper? That's a whole
Then
another
don't
thing.
open the toilet lid.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Especially if it's a vacant house.
So funny, another funny story. I mean, my God, I'm just a plethora of them today. I was sitting in an open house. This is when I first started with this broad from she's with another company.
Broad.
We were broad. Yeah, the house was vacant, and it was on unincorporated.
Maricopa County?
And she went to use the restroom, and apparently someone had gotten there before her to use the restroom, and it was quite explosive, if you know what I mean. And it was, I was mortified. I was like mortified. I mean, we were giggling about it, but it was really bad. But yeah, so that was another beauty of an open house event.
Now, and
But that's really important, like these things that we're kind of touching on, because sometimes sellers don't realize, like you might get a spur of the moment showing request, and if you're at work and you left the house and your bed wasn't made or it wasn't really prepared for showing, like it's really important to prepare it so that the buyers have the best possible experience. And we as agents try to do that and step in, but we're not always there when the buyer and their agent are there, right? So you might not know how somebody left the house.
mop some floors and do.
I definitely
picked
had
up
to do
some,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, I
picked
had
up
to do that.
clothing.
Oh yeah, dirty underwear. I pick
Yeah.
up dirty underwear. That was another beauty.
I had a seller ask me, "Oh no, I forgot to make the bed." I'm like, "I'll make it if you like." And I could tell she just felt uncomfortable,
Oh my God,
Like,
don't tell me.
But I did it, and she was thankful and appreciative, and they actually bought the house. So
Was there anything in the bed?
no, it wasn't one of the
Did you
crazy
see
stories
them?
that I
Did you see them looking for something juicy there? I mean,
Give me the details.
You could have lied.
real estate
Makes
humor.
sense.
Yeah.
More exciting.
It's called embellishing. You could have done that.
Based on a true story.
You just reminded me of a story. So I listed my grandma, sorry to put my grandma on blast, but I listed her home last year, and she was already under contract, but her buyer had wanted to come in and meet with their contractor to do some things in the house after it closed. And she left a pair of underpants on the floor in the bathroom, and she called me and she was like, I think I left underwear out. She was mortified.
Oh,
you know,
my
she's in her 80s. I mean, that is the height of immodesty.
Oh, my
So
Oh my God.
How's she going to feel now that that's part of a podcast?
I'm going to make sure I don't share this one with her.
Come on, she's a long way away. She can only call.
She might have an OnlyFans page that you don't know about.
Oh dear.
I think being a listing agent is in some ways one of the most underappreciated jobs if you're really doing a good job. And it's not like we're going to go tell our sellers, oh, look what we did
Yeah,
for you.
right.
You do what you need to do
To get it
because
sold.
we're there to represent them in the best light. And life happens. So, as poor sellers are on call all the time. And dogs sometimes forget to go outside, and and kids leave messes, and you name it, and it's our that's what we do, and it's it's kind of we're the unsung listing heroes sometimes, but in the end, again, if we're doing the best for our clients, that's what we do.
There's such a truth to that, as a matter of fact, and I don't know the exact statistics because this goes back maybe like 10 years now, but there was a study done and they came to the realization that sellers, for the most part, saw more value in the buyer's agent because they felt that they brought the buyer and they're the ones that sold the house. More so than their listing agent, the one that marketed it, negotiated on their behalf, and protected them from all these other things that could potentially happen. But it's interesting to see a seller's perspective of the buyer's agent versus their listing
There are
agent.
two different roles.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I had an open house and a lady took my card and she called me and she goes, I already bought another house, but I want you to sell my house. And I was like, okay, like, why do you feel that you want to use me versus the agent that you used to buy the house? And she said, well, there are two different roles. And I like the way that you presented the open house and you weren't pushy, and I liked that. And I said, oh, okay.
Very smart. Very
Now,
smart.
Floyd Wickman would have said, when she said, I want you to list my house, she would have asked nothing else and said, well, I would, and just done it. But no, you're right. It's good to know
I
that.
just was curious.
Yeah,
Why,
sure.
I mean, what did she see my value was? And I was flattered, obviously, and grateful. But
Well, it's good to get that feedback.
Yeah, what did I do right?
I'll do more of it.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm so used to hearing, everyone always gives, is easy to complain, right? It's like you go on Yelp and you see like all these, I'd never use this place again, blah, blah. Well, how about when someone does something right, and I always try to applaud people, like, hey, I see that you did an exceptional job, or, thank you very much for whatever. It's just, but people are so quick to judge and give negative feedback versus positive feedback.
That's true.
And I don't know that negative feedback is as helpful as positive. I think, you can give, and other than just like 5 stars and nothing else, but I mean, if you give a little critique, people can find out what they're actually looking for. The negative means you just shut it off, and that could just be a private, personal experience. Maybe you didn't like the person, or maybe you were the problem. How many bad reviews, although I don't think we have any, but usually when you see a bad review, sometimes look at restaurants. It may not have anything to do with the food or the service. It may be that person was having such a rotten day.
So our microwave just broke, right?
Yeah.
And we're looking for a new one. So my wife is online looking at the reviews to kind of see what they like. And we look at the good reviews, we look at the bad reviews. And when we were looking at some of the bad reviews for a particular model, they had nothing to do with the microwave, but it was all about, the installer
Yeah.
didn't show up on
Okay.
time. So it was about their experience buying that microwave as
Right.
well. So, it's interesting how the review process works.
Well, it's funny because now that you mention it, so my husband tried to buy me a Peloton that I maybe didn't really even want, but it's more for him.
Kent, she doesn't want a Peloton.
So they show up with the bike, they try to, do the install, set it up, whatever. The gentleman calls me in and he goes, ma'am, I'm sorry, but, this one's got something wrong, with the cable and it's not working correctly. And I said, oh, no problem, take it back, He's like, they told us to take it, we'll bring you a new bike. They call like a week later, we're ready to deliver your new bike. I'm just like, cool, so come over. Same problem, okay? Same problem. And so we call Peloton, they say, oh, well, we'll send out a new cable to repair that. That's not what we wanted. We wanted a brand new bike. And so was it in fact that they sent out the same bike? And then, and so And then I was like, you know what, maybe this is a sign and I don't want the bike, okay? I told my husband, I don't even want it, like let's just scrap this idea. So then I'm trying to get my money back from Peloton, and it was a disaster.
Wow.
I mean, like, I was on the phone with numerous people, numerous times. They can't find the order, they can't find this, they can't find that. It was a disaster. And then, of course, then my husband tells me, oh yeah, they didn't really have good reviews. There's other bikes that we can look at that had better reviews. I'm like, oh my God.
That's a man thing.
There's bikes at the gym.
Yes, let's
Oh, the
just go to the
reviews.
gym.
Oh, I didn't look at the reviews. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so anyway, I guess that's
It,
neither here nor there. But this is about the reviews, but it's like, how many times do you send out like a Google review to your client? I mean, yeah, they'll fill it out, but it's like, people are more apt to like complain and
Yeah.
fill out something negative. Like, boy, if they're mad, they're quick to get on the internet and blast you and tell you, not me personally, clearly, but,
clearly.
but,
Clearly, right.
no, but like,
It's
just
the
in
nature
general.
of people, yeah,
just
sure.
in general.
I'll admit I blasted a business one time and I was totally having a bad day, but I had walked in and gotten like no attention, and there were people there who were kind of meandering and having conversation. And so
Oh, that
I-
drives me.
Yeah, so I mean, you do, it's like one thing begets another thing.
Right.
In the end, it really didn't serve me, and they lost my business anyway, so.
And what did you learn from that experience?
Getting upset is completely pointless, and I was younger then, so I hadn't been,
Worn down
schooled
yet?
through the hard knocks of life. There's worse things that can happen to you than someone not, making eye contact or acknowledging you. But the
And-
positive feedback is really where it's at,
It
because
is.
when you get that client who's going to share, their experience, and
Right.
it's genuine and it's heartfelt, and we know, like, when we've got a great client, and we're, even if the transaction's difficult, we've got rapport, we've got good communication, and they're so happy at the end, they're so satisfied with your work. That's a gold mine, getting that review from them, and it's so empowering, and getting that reinforcement. It's like, yeah, I'm doing the right things, I'm making the right strides in helping my clients.
It's kind of like my golf game. I want to give up almost every hole, and then I hit that one. It used to be 325-yard drive. It's not that anymore. And you go, yes, I'm going pro. It feels so good. That's kind of like a review, right? Because we go through a lot to get to that closing that may be difficult, and your client realizes that you had their back, right? And you worked hard, and nothing ever goes perfect, but in the end, they know that you were on their side, and that's the biggest reward.
Yeah.
When it comes to reviews, and I just happen to notice this, when you're looking at a product or service kind of out there, like whether you're buying furniture, buying food, versus buying a home, real estate agents tend to have more positive reviews than what would, I think, be the average of the rest of the marketplace for different items or services. And I don't know why that is, but I had an agent once who was so upset that she got a bad review, and because she had like 100 five-star reviews. So like now there's one bad
understand.
review, and she
Ding.
felt like, now she's tarnished, right? And I kind of looked at it like, to me, that legitimizes the rest of those reviews.
It does, totally.
So it's really important to understand that, like you said, you had a bad day. Sometimes people just have a bad day. Maybe it's a miscommunication. Maybe their expectations were different than reality. Let's face it, buying, selling a home is an emotional experience anyway. So people can very much get kind of charged and quickly turn to the internet and start writing some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy,
Especially after a few drinks.
Andy, how long have you been blabbing?
43 minutes.
Oh my gosh, that's long.
Plenty to edit.
You got enough to edit? Can you get 15 minutes out of it, you think? All right, good. Andy is a master of making us look good. He uses filters and all sorts of...
I'm learning it's on my third podcast.
It's like a James Bond kind of camera.
Bond,
Yeah.
James Bond.
All small.
Any last thoughts for sellers?
Buckle up.
I would just say, pay close attention to the market trends and statistics right now. Pricing your home well, having it in good condition, marketable condition is very important. You only get one shot at that first impression putting it on the market. So be very careful with your pricing and presentation.
Very true. And I say, to a seller, you can be committed to one of two things, but generally not both. And that's either price or moving. if you need to move, you kind of have to understand the market and what that price is going to bring you, you know? If you're committed to price, well, then you may not have to move, and that's okay, but there's some negative things that can happen if you try to test the market, because now you've established a history.
Yeah.
And everybody looks at Realtor and Zillow and looks at the
Sure.
history, so you don't want to see something that's been on and off the market for a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
years.
because if you don't look serious,
Yeah,
you know,
so-
and that comes down to motivation, and testing the waters right now is
Not the time to
no,
do it.
This is not the time.
Correct.
I think the last thing I would say is price is what you pay, value is what you get. You think about in a more normalized market, more difficult market, who you hire will net you more money. It isn't about, did I save $500 on a commission? It's who's going to give me the advice I need,
Be honest, transparency.
keep me up to date on the real numbers, and help me achieve the goal that I want. And again, it's not for everybody. I talked to a friend of mine who's gave the pricing, and she said, she's the one that talked about the auto valuations were so much higher. And I explained to her, why the price was the price. And she said, okay, I think we'll wait. And I said to her, I think you should wait. It's a semi-seasonal area, and I said, if you don't need to do it today, let's wait till September, October. Things are going to change.
Sure.
And
Consumer confidence will come
and
back.
agents don't want to sometimes, especially needy agents, want to say, just give me the listing, give me the
Right.
listing.
Self-serving, yeah.
Yeah.
So
100%.
our job is to also not take listings occasionally.
Correct.
Yes, because we all know what happens. It will expire, or,
Yeah.
and then you've wasted all your money on marketing materials and pictures, all that nonsense.
And
Part of our role is to
frustrated
help the prospective seller understand whether or not it's even a move that makes sense for them.
Right.
And that's part of that process and that
Right.
consultation, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
That's right. So with that,
I bid you adieu.
I bid you adieu. Adieu. How's my do? Another episode of The Good, Bad, and the Orange. Remember to like, subscribe, comment. What else? Follow, share.
Do as you're told.
Do as you're told.
And follow all of us.
Yes.
We didn't
sure.
even introduce ourselves.
That's right. So let's do that quick. Let's do that really quick. Who are you? State your name.
Heather Buttleman.
I'm Stephanie Kaufman. You can follow me on Instagram at Real Estate Ista. That's Real Estate ISTA. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm Bill McCartney. You can follow me at Bill McCartney on Insta.
Okay, you know what? I didn't get to say follow me.
Okay,
Well-
say your follow me.
Okay. Hi, I'm Heather Buttleman. You can follow me at Heather Buttleman.
You were looking for the outtake? You got
Cut.
it. All right. Until next time, have a great orange day.